How did your career transition from there?
Yeah, so it was all good until I graduated high school, and my parents were, really, really pushing on me going to college. And at that time too, the message was very different than it is now. Like back then, if you didn't go to college, you were kind of saying goodbye to any type of like real career, right? You couldn't even get in the door without a college degree back then.
Yeah.
So my parents are really scared about me continuing to skate and not going to college. And to be totally truthful with you, I was actually scared of that too, because I always had this idea of what my life was going to look like. And at least what I was told at that time, I actually thought I was saying goodbye to that too by going all in and being a pro skateboarder.
Mm-hmm.
So my original idea was I would be a pro skateboarder for 2 years. I wasn't going to go to college. I was going to start traveling. I was going to, I still had to convince my sponsors to pay me. But my original, let's see if this is going to work was I'll go do it 2 years, and then I could always go back to school after, go into a normal career, and then kind of go on and live my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I called on my sponsors, and I kind of gave them an ultimatum. I just didn't put it in my hands. I was like, hey, look, guys, my parents are really on me about going to college. I want to keep skating. There's no way I'm going to be able to do this unless I'm making some money. So this is what I really want to do, but I'm going to need to make something, or I'm just going to have to go back to school. So thank you guys for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And out of my 3 sponsors, they all 3 ended up paying me. It was a real little amount. And that's kind of what started my journey. And then the Tony Hawk game came out, skateboarding kind of went mainstream. And, in that 2 years of me doing this, I'll just go out and have fun, the industry just completely exploded. And I went from, being this kid making $1,000 a month, being a pro skateboarder, to now making more than my parents were. It was just a complete change in what was happening.
So how did that college conversation go after you were making more than your parents? Do they still want you to go to college?
You know what? What's funny? It changed. There was still a concern there, but I looked at it, and I think they did too. Like, hey guys, there's actually something here. I can actually do something, but I still am putting myself in a position where I don't have a 30-year career, right? I don't get to do this till I'm 65, then have this conventional exit. I have a very small window at doing this. Yeah, I'm making a lot of money now, but there's so many variables to if my career is going to continue to go. If I have a perfect career, what the hell am I going to do in 10 years? So, right when I started making money, it just became a new challenge to figure out. And that was how am I going to put myself in a position where I'm not going to suffer on the back end by doing this now.
Yeah.
And that was something that I was scared of. My parents were scared of. So my dad walked me into his financial. Hey, dude, my kid's making all this money. I have no idea how he's doing it. He's not skating contests. What do we do? I'm sitting here 20 years old, and his name was Randy, the guy my dad walked me into. And he's kind of asking about my career, and, I'm telling him, and he goes, well, you are so different than my typical client that we're going to have to build this very custom strategy for you. And me just being at a young age, him not knowing about the skate industry, I felt like I was a part of this conversation and plan. And thankfully what it did is it opened my eyes into what this career actually looked like. I was taught some type of financial literacy at a kind of a young age, and really I think molded me into prepare for the end of my career at a very young age,
mm-hmm.
which I'm very thankful for my parents for, because I don't know if I would have done that or not without their guidance.
Yeah, sure. Hey, I'm a big fan of visualization and, just kind of retelling some of the stories. I remember when I got my first big check racing off-road, and I was talking to my mom, and she's like, you got what for racing a car? What was your first big check like, and how did that conversation go with your parents? Because I imagine it was pretty exciting for everybody.
So my first big check really came when I got my first pro shoe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where skaters make the most amount of their money. And it was at a time where I was negotiating a new contract with my shoe sponsor. So they weren't aware that my contract was about to end. My shoe had just hit the market, and I was in this kind of like grace period, and they were kind of panicking. So we were trying to negotiate this new deal. I was getting a new contract from them seriously every 2 days, and would come in the the manila folder, right, or whatever, on my doorstep. And so I got to a point where I was so frustrated by seeing these things that I would just like kind of throw them. And I got one and I just threw it and thought nothing of it. Right. Well, that ended up being my first shoe royalty check. I thought it was another contract. So 3 months goes by. I'm having like some friends over. Somebody sits on the couch and they feel this like thing under the cushion. He pulls it out and he's like, "What the heck is this?" And I was like, "Oh, dude, it's some stupid contract." Like, I ended up re-signing. It's like, "This is some stupid contract. Like, whatever, you could just throw it away." And he's like, "All right, well, let's just look at it." He opens it and it's a check. And he goes, "Dude, you have a check here." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He looks, it's a $75,000 check.
Oh my
God. You have a $75,000 check here. I'm like, "What the are you talking?" And I would have completely thrown it away, never had thought about it. And that was my first experience, like a big check.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So clear.
And I had never gotten a royalty check before, so I wouldn't even known that was something that came.
Yeah. Well, there's a lesson right there for all you potential professional athletes. Pay attention to the royalty agreement. Could be worth a lot of money.
100%. And just to go on that one, if you're an athlete that's going into a career, don't do your contract yourself. Have somebody look over that contract that knows what they're doing, because when you start getting into royalties, how they're paid out, you can really get screwed over by that. So make sure you have good guidance going into these things.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. The way that I look at that, especially, if you are an athlete and you're looking at being a professional, or maybe you are a professional at this point, you have to invest back in your business, not only in your equipment, get a new skateboard, new wheels, all that stuff. Hopefully you're getting sponsored with that, but also invest back in your business by having, like you said, a financial planner, having a good attorney to look over your contracts, all those things. Treat it like a business and you'll reap the rewards of it being a business, is what I like to tell people.
100%. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So you start making some money here on these royalties, and life's moving along. How old are you at this point, and where's your career going?
So at this point, I'm 23. I got my first shoe. It's kind of like, it's like all happening, right? Like, I put out the biggest video part of my life. I'm definitely kind of have a lot of momentum going. And, at that age, I started, when I got that first check, I was I was so thrilled about how I got it. I wanted more of it, right? How do I get more of these royalty checks? How do I make them even more money? And I started diving into how the business side worked of me selling products.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got really into the sales side. I got really into marketing, and I wanted to be more involved in that company I rode for beyond me just being a skater. So I put together this whole plan where I wanted to help build the team. I wanted to help with design. And I have a meeting with the president. I tell him all these things, and he looks at me like I'm crazy, right? He's like, "What are you talking about, dude? Why don't you just go skate? Like, you have like the dream scenario. Why are you worried about like product? Go do tricks," right? And I left that meeting and I realized, and that to me is where like the kind of entrepreneurial desire really hit, that I wanted more than just to be the athlete. I wanted to like have my own thing. I wanted to like be a part of the process. And that's, to me, where my career ended up taking the biggest turn. Is I started going down this rabbit hole of wanting to be more involved with companies, which led to me then starting my first company.
What was the first company you started?
So the first company I technically started was Bravo Backpacks, but the second one that quickly followed was St. Archer, which is a brewery down in San Diego.
Yeah, just a little deal there with St. Archer. That's a pretty big step from Bravo Backpacks to St. Archer.
It was a pretty big step, but it was a bunch of kids who, felt like they could, accomplish anything that they put their mind to. And we were naive in a sense, but we went into this thing full steam, and I don't think anyone was going to tell us that we couldn't do it.
Yeah. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, no problem. We didn't, just to kind of test, we didn't know what this meant back then. When we decided to do St. Archer, it felt the same as us doing a backpack company when the idea started. We didn't realize how much more went into it until we did that first year of like trying to put this thing into a plan.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as I mentioned earlier, you're probably the king of saying yes with all these opportunities that have come your way. But, here you are, a professional skateboarder. All of a sudden, you're going to venture into business and jump in, all in, apparently, based on, all the reports on your success there. How do you transition your mental state? Because, when you're out, boarding and doing that whole deal, it's a completely different world than starting a beer company with some buddies and really, I mean, look, I'm in that business and I know the licensing and everything that goes behind that. It's not an easy gig.
No. So, there's, I don't want to say it's the same thing because it's not. There's a lot more at play when it goes into building a business, but there's a lot of similarities in the mindset, I believe, that athletes have that really transfers over into business. And for us, and let's talk specifically to skating. Skating is so hard and so technical that, we sit here, like for me learning how to kickflip, it took me 8 months of trying every single day for 4 hours to learn how to kickflip. You can imagine all the failing that went in to me figuring out how to succeed at it one time, right? And then to move towards me being a pro. When I would go out and do tricks, dude, I would jump off stairs for 3 hours trying to land it one time.
Wow.
So we get so used to this process of we're going to mess up way more times than we succeed. It's going to be very painful. It's going to be brutal. We're going to be tested. Everything in us is going to say, stop, enough. And we are forced to push through that to experience the joy of succeeding one time.
Yeah.
And so skaters, and I think where it really worked for me is I took that same mindset into everything I've ever done. Okay, this is going to be brutal. It's going to hurt. It's going to suck, but we're going to figure it out. And really how I looked at doing it, I was kind of forced to think this way. I was still skating. So I couldn't just step away from skating and go 100% into business, right? I had to create a team and partnerships around me so that I could still skate and do this on the side. So it almost taught me how to create leverage in a sense by default, because I just had to figure out how to do both. And so when you start going into like the intricacies of licensing or brewing, or it was me putting people around me that could then go out and build the team and manage the team of those people at that time.
Yeah, sure. Well, the way I look at it too in business, compared to my racing, I'm not going to die in the boardroom where I can go, racing. I can die in the car. So for you, you're not going to break an arm or a collarbone running the board meeting with St. Archer, so like you said, you can just go full forward and know it's going to be hard, but what's the worst that's going to happen, right? They're going to break something.
Yeah, totally. And I will say this, there was, I really enjoy the process of business. I love the struggle of trying to launch a brand. I love the challenge of trying to build brand awareness. I love having a team structure, relying on these systems. I just really enjoy that side. So I think the mentality that I was taught through skateboarding, enjoying that process and the challenge of it is kind of, I think ultimately why I was drawn towards business. It's like all the challenges of skating with way more moving parts. And I'm just like, I enjoy trying to work through new challenges in life, and I think just business is just a whole beast of that.
Yeah, sure. For our listeners that don't know your story in St. Archer, could you give us the brief synopsis of what happened with St. Archer and the success you had over there?
Yeah, so with St. Archer, I had two partners, Josh Landon, who was at this time a manager, athlete manager and surf filmmaker, and Paul Rodriguez, who was my childhood best friend and pro skateboarder. Us three co-founded a brewery called St. Archer. We ended up having to raise money for it. We raised money from all our friends and family, which happened to be a lot of other pro skaters and surfers. Started this brewery in 2012. And we ended up selling it in 2015 to North